Bill and Vice Chair for legislation, and I'll begin by reading the notice. Board of Alders notice in favor. The Legislation Committee of the Board of Alders will meet in person on Tuesday, August 2nd, 2022 at 6 p.m. in the Board of Alders chamber located at 165 Church Street, second floor, New Haven, Connecticut, to hear and act on the following items. Item 1, OR-2022-0020, ordinance amendment of the New Haven Board of Alders to modernize city ordinances to reflect language that is respectful to people with disabilities. Item 2, OR-2022-0019, ordinance by the New Haven Board of Alders establishing a temporary 12-month moratorium on the submission and acceptance of applications, site plans, variances, special exceptions, special permits, and rezoning amendments within the Longmore responsible floodplain area, moratorium area, providing for authority, legislative findings back, moratorium area, temporary moratorium imposed, duration of temporary moratorium, and severability. Per Honorable Charles Becker Chair, attest Honorable Michael Smart's report. These items are on file and available in the office of the City Clerk, room 202 at 200 Orange Street, New Haven, Connecticut 06510. For accessibility related accommodations, please call 203-946-7651 or 203-946-8582. Public comment or testimony may be submitted via email to publictestimony@newhavencity.gov before 2 p.m. on the day of the meeting. And at this time, I'm going to ask our roll call of my colleagues. Starting with
Jeanette Alder, Jeanette Morrison, Ward 22.
Alder Adam Marchand, Ward 25.
all right. At this time, I want to invite the makers of the first item, OR-2022-0020, ordinance amendment of the New Haven Board of Alders to modernize city ordinances to reflect language that is respectful to people with disabilities. Thank you.
I'm also joined here by members of the Commission on Disabilities and the former director of the Department of Services.
You would need to speak into the microphone.
So I'm joined here by members of the Commission on Disabilities and the former director of the Department of Services for Persons with Disabilities.
Excellent. Thank you for being here this evening. Please state your name and address for the record, and please begin.
My name is Gretchen Knopf. I'm the director of the Department of Services for Persons with Disabilities, and my address is 228 Mile Creek Road in Old Lyme, Connecticut. We thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to talk about the ordinance change this morning to reflect the language that's respectful to people with disabilities. I did provide a one-page document on the power of person first language is culture. I think the document says a lot about what we were aiming for in proposing this legislation. It speaks about the power of language, and it talks about how language changes our perceptions or creates our perceptions about people. And that is especially true for people with disabilities. It really does influence the way we see them. Historically, terms have been used to describe people with disabilities that have brought on images for people as seeing people with disabilities as less than human, created pity, low expectations, really not looking at individuals as people. The current ordinance language does reflect very outdated terminology. The language used to refer to people with disabilities now is called person first language. This is what is generally preferred by the members of the disability community. And it's looking at a person with a disability as a person first. Your disability doesn't define you. It's a trait. It's part of who you are, just like brown hair, blue eyes, right-handed, left-handed, anything like that. So the idea is that we look at saying that you are a person with a disability, not a handicapped person. You're a person who is blind. You are a person with a mobility impairment. So we are not talking about the disability first. In the proposed changes, some of the examples that we wanted to change involve changing the word handicap to person with a disability or disability, depending on the context. The term mental retardation is used in the ordinances. The terminology that's accepted now is intellectual disability. You'll see those changes in both in state and federal legislation. Again, various state and federal laws have changed the language around disability. These changes are not going to have any type of fiscal impact. They don't change the intent of the statute. They just modernize it and bring it up to date with the state and federal law to be more respectful to people with disabilities.
Thank you so much for that explanation. I want to quickly pass my colleague from the consent report to show this, and also welcome our colleague from the 46 who is here as well. Thank you for that explanation. At this time, I'm going to turn to my colleagues and ask if there are any questions for the presenter.
I have a question, Madam Chair. Thank you very much for bringing this forward. I did review the packet, and it seems that you and the city staff who worked on this together were thorough in identifying mentionings of people with disabilities that were in the older language. Who worked on this with you? Did you have to, just you?
Yeah.
You yourself and you?
Yeah, I'm my own staff.
Okay. No assistance from Corporation Counsel. This is something that you were able to just do on your own.
I did do that on my own, but they did review it because the Corporation Counsel is my boss. So.
That's how it works.
Yeah.
Your boss reviews your work. Okay.
Yeah.
And so I saw in your introductory document that you gave a couple of examples, referring, instead of handicapped people, referring to people with disabilities or people who have disabilities, mental retardation removed and then replaced with intellectual disabilities. Any other examples you want to provide us for updates to the language?
Most of it is changing terminology from handicapped to disability or person with disability. I left in the term handicap parking because that's still common in what you see. However, I believe I also added reserve parking to that because now the statutes in Connecticut create reserve parking spaces rather than handicap parking spaces. And hopefully we'll get rid of the terminology handicap parking permit. I think they mostly call them parking placards now. So it was a recognition that that's still there, but also looking at the modernized language.
Thank you. Appreciate that. No further questions at this time, Madam Chair.
Yeah, sure. I'm not concerned once again any questions from colleagues that I miss. Alder.
Thank you. Thank you so much for working on this, for bringing us into the 21st century, and to use language that is appropriate and that is respectful. I know that I'm sorry for coming in a little late. I was listening for the meeting to start and I didn't hear it. So I looked at my watch, but is there, and you may not have the answer to this, and that's maybe it's more of a financial question, but I'm just wondering what the cost is, or if you know what the cost is approximately to redo all the signs.
Which signs are you referring to?
Well, there's going to be a change in handicap signage throughout the city, wouldn't there be?
You would not necessarily have to change the signs for the handicap parking spaces, for example.
Because it already has just a symbol on it.
It does say handicap parking, but there is a requirement in the state statute that if you alter the space or you change it, that you have to make the changes that modernize the signage to be reserved parking. So it's not something the city has to go and change. It's okay for it to stay until there's a modification, like if they redo the parking lot and redo the spaces and they add the signage
Oh, I
and
see.
make the changes that way.
Okay, so everything's gonna stay in place until there's some work done to those spaces.
Yes,
Interesting. Okay,
not my favorite thing, but
yeah,
I understand.
okay. And then in city-owned buildings, where there's any signage inside of the building, will that be changed?
This does not require the signage to be changed. This is really a modernization of the ordinances, and the ordinances aren't requiring any particular kind of signage.
Even more interesting. Okay.
Doesn't
Thank you.
mean we can't do it.
Yeah, yeah,
this
you
legislation
must see the
doesn't
wheels
necessarily
spinning in my
do that.
head.
I'm good with
Yeah.
that.
Okay, great. Thank you, Madam Chair.
So, any more questions from colleagues? All right, thank you so much for your presentation, and at this time, I'm going to open up the public portion. I have a list here of folks who decided to testify, and first on the list is Robin Kelsey Irons. Good evening. Come up, take a seat, and just state your name and address for the record.
I almost said good morning.
That's okay, and please speak into the microphone.
So my name is Robin Towsey Ayers. I live on,
You have to hold it, yeah, like that's
Okay.
tricky.
ta-da. So my name is Robin Towsey Ayers. I live on Cantor Street here in the city of New Haven. And I wanted to come up and speak on behalf of this ordinance update because I've served on the commission since 1999, I think it is. So it's really rewarding to see that we can move forward and make changes. It probably doesn't occur to you very often, but the work that we do on behalf of people with disabilities here in New Haven is quite above and beyond many other localities here in Connecticut. So we are seen as a benchmark for people to reach for. So in our day-to-day work, we see it. You might not, but we do. So so thank you very much for considering the ordinance update and come to one of our meetings. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. At this time, we're going to open up to the public. If there are any members of the public wishing to testify on this item, please come forward. And so the second time, if there's any members of the public who are interested in speaking on this item, please come forward. And the third time, any members of the public wishing to speak on this item, please come forward. So at this time, I will close the public portion. I will not close the public portion. I will move on to discussion. I will move on to the next item. That's what I'm going to do. Thank you. Thank you for bearing with me. For Simon chairing this committee. So would the makers of item 2 please come forward? Good evening, all.
Oh, wait a minute. No, our people left under the ceiling.
Okay.
When you're told, please, put your name and address for the record.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Michael Piscatelli. I reside at 353 Summit Street in New Haven. I'm the Economic Development Administrator.
My name is Esther Rose Wiley. I live at 126 Edward Street in New Haven, and I'm a planner in the city of
Everyone's such a year every year as a city.
I'm Rob Williams, now it's the Corporation Council. Last slide, right? First off, I wanted to thank you for your time tonight. Wanted to express our gratitude and support for the Disabilities Commission and the work the directors did on that ordinance. I was a little surprised by the parking exemption. We'll work with the department to get that aligned as well. It means a lot to us. But for our item tonight, appreciate your efforts on law work over the years, not least the landmark approval of the 2019 Responsible Growth Plan. And today we'll talk a little bit about context for a proposed zoning moratorium. We've organized the presentation in three main parts. We'll do a little on economic insights that we're seeing citywide and in the district. Talk a little bit about the implementation of this plan. We're 3 years in on implementation. And then Esther will walk through the proposed moratorium, which is designed to align our zoning regulations with the goals and objectives of the plan. And you'll pick up on some themes through that conversation. One is making sure that we're consistently aligned on our goals for land use and the economic objectives of the city. And then second, in light of the fierce and dramatic rise in issues related to climate change, that we have a high level of resiliency in this district, given that we are in a flood zone and that the 5,000 jobs that we have down at Walmart today are at risk unless we continue to implement this plan, really grow the district and create a place that's truly sustainable, urban, and with genuine inclusion for all of the city. Many times we talk about in these hearings, Long Wharf is the city's neighborhood. It truly is a place for all of us, and we're really all humbled to work on it. If you turn to slide 3, the economic insights that we just put some table set in here about what we're seeing citywide. The bounce back out of the pandemic has been strong, and it has been across the city. We had peaked at over 10,000 continuing unemployment claims citywide. There were residents who were filing for unemployment week after week at the Department of Labor. We're well under 1,000, unless the count we put in here. We're pushing about 20 million in building permit value right now. So obviously a lot of pressure on our teams, both city plan and our building department across the board. You've been very supportive of getting the right projects moving, and we think there's a strong economic foundation going forward. I think you see that manifest with 101 College Street, the neuroscience campus at Yale New Haven Health, as well as some projects still to come forward. You know, the science, $7 billion for humanity campaign at Yale University. That growth needs a place to go, and your planning for that helps us keep it in the city, for one, given we don't have a lot of land assets, and then connects it to our residents to make sure that we have work available for all. And then on the second slide, maybe a little bit less familiar, next slide here, happening on Long Wharf as well. So Lyman Orchards took over the space where Something Sweet used to be. So if you go down to the food terminal with Hummel's, and then right next door is a facility that Something Sweet used, and Lyman Orchards has taken over that facility, as well as the one on Grand Avenue next to the old Ferraro's Market. So a really nice example of having great infrastructure that it worked for the next company interested in. And so if you go to Lyman Orchards up in Middlefield, many of the products you see there today are made right here in New Haven. So just a good another anchor business in our district. The Amistad has returned to its home port, and they are renting space at the boathouse. Again, a sign of a real strength in district for people moving in. that the Amistad has the, sort of confidence in us that we'll be able to stay over the long haul. And then to my point about resiliency and being environmentally responsive, particularly in this district, two things come to mind. One is the Hotel Marcel, 165 rooms. The board, City Planning Commission, many people were involved in this particular project. I don't think anyone truly understood the vision that Bruce Becker had put forth at the time. But this will be at the very, very top across the nation of environmentally responsive hotels. And all those solar panels that you see out there fuels all of the electricity in the building for the lighting, the heating and cooling, as well as all the plugins for the parking stations. So it says something about the city and the people that built here that's coming together very nicely. And then Asa Abla, of course, former Sargent Manufacturing Company, was recently recognized by Resiliency, and that's a company that certifies best practice in healthcare institutions for their environmentally responsive practices. And they have any number of products that are now certified for environment and sustainability, and they have an 80% or above waste diversion rate. So, not throwing stuff in dumpsters out and back, but really reusing the products in additive manufacturing. And that's happening right here on Longworth. So I say this all from a point that for the board's position and for us, this is really a right to own. This is a place to fight for, has great value for the city, not only economically, but for social, environmental cohesion. And so the plan, Carlos will talk about in the moratorium, are these sort of component pieces, which then flow down to some of the things we just talked about, like will really allow us to continue to do great things and support, their work all over the world, quite frankly. So with that, I'll close on the opening comments, and then Carlos talk a little bit about the plan, and we'll go right into the moratorium.
Hi, everybody. Carlos is here. Thank you so much for to present to you guys today. So yeah, I was one of the lead staffers in the law of responsible growth plan, as you may remember, those of you that were here in 2016 to 2019. I think what the long-run responsible growth plan sort of envisioned is marrying some of the things that we're talking about with coastal resiliency that we'll talk to you about in a moment, with truly turning the Longworth district into a real neighborhood. If you might recall, because we did do a lot of public outreach on this plan, the Longworth responsible growth plan envisions 5 sort of distinct districts because of the size of the district. It's very large, so we sort of see room for 5 distinct districts within what we could do as a Longworth area, sort of wrapping around to actually the port side, which we may not always consider part of Longworth, as we envision it today. So some of the larger goals of the plan are envisions lots of new housing down there where there is currently none. As I think Mike mentioned, there's 5,000 jobs already on Longworth, which is just really significant. Asa Abla has 500-600, so there's 80 at Jordan's, several hundred at the food terminal. So it's really so we foresee this kind of development down there adding up to 3,500 new jobs, and of course millions in new tax revenue. And so you're seeing us sort of build this district. We always envisioned it being built in a sort of phased way, and I think you're seeing that both. You're seeing us both working complementary with the coastal resiliency stuff that I'll talk about in a moment, and then some of the development. So not only do you have the Hotel Marcel, but you also have the Health Trust HTA Health Trust Associates, the largest owner of MOBs and medical office buildings in the country. Purchased one Longworth. They're a Phoenix, Arizona company, so they're really sitting beachhead in Connecticut, and so you're seeing really significant investment happening there as well. And so that's sort of following along the lines of the plan. Some of the goals, so some of these larger goals for the Longworth plan and some of the projects are a mix of, like I said, coastal resiliency, climate ready infrastructure. Driving greater equity both in jobs and housing. We see so many. We hear recently with the graduate unionizing. We see really exciting for me personally, but we see the strong labor union presence in New Haven, creating some of these better jobs. So we saw at the graduate, and hopefully we see some of this at some of the other large employers on Long Wharf. So those are, and then also of particular importance is the connection of Long Wharf to Union Station and State Station. So, we've been talking a lot about the work at Union Station that we're doing now is also pretty complementary to what we're doing in Long Wharf. So they're so close together. A little bit of description on the resiliency and stormwater work is, there's hundreds of millions of dollars of coastal resiliency work approved already for that district. For the Long Wharf district, you have the new flood wall, which is the $160 million 1 mile long wall along Sergeant Drive that will protect both the infrastructure assets and the business assets on Long Wharf from sea level rise and storms, coastal storms. You also have the harbor navigation project, which is a $65 million dredging project in the harbor itself, which will allow water ships to pass through the harbor. So that's about $250 million right there, give or take, of coastal resiliency work in harbor. You also have the Living Shoreline project, which is about 10 years old now, which is stabilizing the Long Wharf shoreline. We're using natural materials to stabilize it from erosion. And then you even have the new upfall pipe, which will sort of keep the hill in, which will hopefully minimize some of the flooding in the hill in downtown as the water then is outfalls into the harbor during storms and flooding events. So so all of these are really being, I think, done thoughtfully to allow us to both do physical development and do it in a way that is that make sure that these assets, that the residents that are moving down there, that the people that already live in the hill and in parts of downtown are protected from storms. So that's some of that's sort of some of the background of some of the work we're doing there and why we think why we're working so hard to align the zoning as well.
Thank you, Carlos. I'm going to talk a little bit about the zoning and the ordinance, the proposed ordinance language. Again, my name is Esther Rose Weiland, 126 Edward Street, New Haven. I'm a planner with the City Plan Department. This is my first time at the committee. Thank you for having me. I just started in the department in October. I grew up in New Haven. I love this city. Some of my favorite places in New Haven are in the Long Wharf area. I'm here in part because our director, Laura Brown, couldn't join us today. She put in a lot of hard work on this, and I know she wishes she could be here. So just to go over some of the goals for the new zoning that the moratorium will give us time to put into place. The new zoning will increase allowable uses. It will discourage detrimental uses that contradict the goals of the Long Wharf Sustainable Growth Plan. It will encourage multi-use spaces and mixed-use development. So envisioning Long Wharf as a place where you can live and work and shop and eat, and recreate on the waterfront. It will increase density in the area. And then sort of to some of what Carlos spoke to, it will put in place resiliency requirements, sustainability requirements, and address flood protection and urban heat island effect. And actually, some of this planning has already begun, and it was one of the first planning projects that I was looped into when I started. And there's some really exciting, really cutting edge work on the resiliency requirements and the sustainability measures that I think is going to make this zoning really unique, really progressive, really cutting edge for Long Wharf. So we're proposing a 1-year moratorium on new projects within the district. And we are also, I believe so the next section in your packet is the staff report from the City Plan Commission. And the City Plan Commission has recommended some amendments to the ordinance as originally submitted to the Board of Alders. And these amendments include some categorical exclusions and also a provision for exemptions from the moratorium. And I'd be happy to go over those in more detail if you would like.
Yes, please.
Okay. So flipping to the clean ordinance, which is after the city plan commission report. You have them- the orange one.
There's a red line in there, there's a six, there's a red line in the green.
Oh, okay, the green one, yes. Okay. So this is the proposed ordinance. There's a section 3 on location, outlining the location covered for what the moratorium area is. We've also included a list of MPLUs of all of the parcels included in the moratorium area, just to note that we identified a couple of residential parcels that are outside of the long-term responsible growth plan area. They were inadvertently included on this list and they have been removed. And then, so if you go to section 4B, those are our categorical exclusions. And these are categories of activities for which the temporary moratorium would not apply, as there's no significant impact on the site, and it wouldn't impact the goals of the long-term sustainable growth plan. And those include lot mergers, pending projects, operation of a cannabis establishment within a pre-existing structure, matters on a parcel of land subject to an unexpired written agreement between the city and the owner with no certificate of completion issued, matters involving interior fit out that do not require any other approvals, matters exempt from review by the building department, matters of exterior or site work not requiring any additional approvals, and matters which involve implementation of existing approved PDD general plans. So there are categorical exclusions. And then we've also created this provision for exemptions, where any person could file a written request for exemption from the moratorium with the Board of Alders. And so this was designed to capture any projects, any really minor work similar in scope to the categorical exclusions, but that does not fall under the categorical exclusions, or larger projects that may be determined to be incredibly aligned with the long-term responsible growth plan. And so the Board of Alders would have the ability to grant or deny such an exemption, and based on whether the proposal is in conformity with the responsible growth plan. And we've provided some criteria here to aid in that decision-making process. So those are the major changes as recommended by the City Plan Commission. Thank you.
So Walters, to also dial it back, the moratorium essentially freezes new construction within the district, as Esther had mentioned. We intend, on the last page on a timeline, not to use all 12 months. The city plan staff, both Aisha Woods, our fire director, and Laura Brown, will also offer to drive all the way in from vacation tonight to give you a sense of the level of commitment to this particular project. We told her that would not be advisable. We're well on our way to drafting it. So we plan on community meetings, should the board approve it, community meetings in the early fall, work with the business owners, potential developers down there, straw test it. And then we would like to bring it to you for formal adoption in the fourth quarter of this year if all goes well, given that the intent here is to align with the plan and allow projects in a pipeline to keep moving, but to get it right. If we were not to do the moratorium, we run into this entanglement where, a really good project ends up at the Board of Zoning Appeals, the City Planning Commission, possibly over to the Board of Alders, and that does not serve our customers very well. And in particular, the resiliency standard does not exist in the existing ordinance. So we have what we call base flood elevation +1, which recognizing we're building a flood wall, we want to make sure we get that right and very much aligned with where the Department of Environment, Energy and Protection want us to be, much as you saw with the Fusco Maritime Center project. Before that came before the Board of Alders, there was quite a bit of back and forth to make sure we had good alignment on a resiliency standard, so we can bring that to you. It's a lot harder in other parts of the district. We've got like BA zoning and IL or the industrial zone. It's much more difficult. So with that, Rob Williams, our counsel, is here as well tonight to answer any questions. We want to bounce some scenarios back and forth. But that concludes the formality of the presentation. And again, we very much appreciate your time and consideration of what's very important here on the zoning on Long Wharf. Thank you.
Thank you all for being here. Thank you for your presentation. I'm now opening it up to questions and comments and comments.
It's a statement question, right? So I've been in New Haven all my life, 54 years. And it seems like all my life they've been talking about doing something tomorrow. And you see little peaks of different things happening, but you don't really see this big movement, right? And so this type of stuff makes me nervous because it's saying, okay, nothing new could come in, nothing new could go out. But if the timeline, and I know Michael, that you just talked about how you're not really trying to use the 12 months and all of that, but it seems like that's always set, right? And then you look at Long Wharf and you don't really see much action. And so I guess for me, because this makes me nervous, and you know, I've read the information, I just want to know what's going to be different this time, right? Well, why this time will be different? It's going to be so different. We need to put the brakes on everything, any and everything that might want to come in there, and then maybe it not happen. Because I find that you know, we have these different areas and people have their plans, they don't initiate them, and then something new comes out in the world that's important to folks, and then we have, say, a moratorium such as this, then that new thing can't come in there because of the fact that there's a moratorium, even though it's 12 months. So I'm glad to see that versus just forever. So what's new this time versus, and I don't even know if you can answer that because not that you've been here for 54 years doing this, but you can take a stab at it.
Well, I mean, a little context for this district, right? So Long Wharf is the manifestation of the original construction of I-95. So they scooped out all the soils to make room for the highway, and they layered it on Long Wharf to create this district. It was a history of filling, you know, the history, you see the old maps with how the pier was this big long thing. Sargent was really the waterfront over by Worcester Square. But the 95 project really built out this industrial district. So the planning for the district was industrial, low density, big lawns. And of our urban renewal plans, I would say, I think in many respects, it was very forward thinking. Because if you were to go through cities around the country at that time, gas stations, big billboards, you know, the edge of town type of stuff. But our predecessors at the Board of Alders and on the staff side wanted to make it a beautiful presentation of New Haven. So those big front lawns, like in front of Jordan's, was all the plan. Now it's evolved over time. So we want, you know, I think more of a higher density to introduce residential. There's a market confidence now that you could build in a more exposed environment like Long Wharf because we're building the flood wall. So by doing the investments that Carlos made, it's a partnership with the federal government. So they're coming in and said, we're going to build all of these resiliency measures, but you've got to do your part and not put people at risk by allowing people to maybe build a low density or under the proper height, the building height that you need really to be safe. Create a scenario whereby you've got to evacuate a lot of people should there be a major storm. So the big difference is the federal investment that's coming in is our partnership that we have to do our part right. And if you were, let's say you were a federal official, you're choosing all these projects around the country, If this Board of Alders or this City Planning Commission says, all right, well, Taco Bell, that works for us, that's a problem for that, because this investment is related to significant drivers. And a fast food restaurant might have lots of options. And you should look at a fast food restaurant as part of something bigger, not as a standalone thing with a lot of parking around it. So that's the big difference, is we're getting pressure from others. It's not just a local thing. The other thing I'd add is we're very cognizant that we don't want to jam everything up. And I think the staff used the word stifle. We don't stifle everything. So there's a cannabis business that's looking at the old Long Wharf Theater. It's in the interest of the Long Wharf Theater to find a new use there, the food terminal. It's an existing building. So we have some carve outs that Esther mentioned, whereby if it's an existing building, like the Greek Olive restaurant, there's a new restaurant coming in, that's okay. And that will keep moving. It's normal running course of business. But if they wanted to build a new restaurant, that would be triggered by the moratorium. And that's why we're going to keep on moving there. I hope that's helpful. It's a very fair point about, what changed.
Right, so bottom line is the partners, the federal government is putting the pressure on you, so you can't ignore it. And then the other piece is, if there's something already existing, they can do what they do. But if they wanted to build another type of something, they wouldn't be able to for this 12 months. Okay. That makes sense. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I do have some questions. Thank you. Nice to see everybody. Thank you for your presentation. I have heard this discussion before with the commission, and I'm grateful that the staff took the commission's feedback and made further changes. I just want to make sure that I'm really clear, and then we're all really clear. The red line version is different, certainly, from the ordinance that was originally submitted to this board. But it's additionally different from the version that the commission saw. Correct? And so this red line version includes edits that were made after submission and before the commission meeting, but also changes that were made subsequent to the commission meeting.
So in your packet tonight, we have the presentation, the City Plan Commission report, and then a red line version and a clean version. And we're requesting adoption tonight of the clean version with the clean map and the updated address list. The clean version is responsive to the comments made at the City Plan Commission. So Esther, you were there, you probably walk through with more detail, but it was the intent of the staff to write up the amendment that we're asking for your vote tonight is responsive to the commission's rigorous review. As you know, zoning ordinance and map changes have 2 public hearings. So the commission is a big step in the process. They have their own public hearing, and then you for the second of the 2 public hearings.
Yeah, so just to clarify a little bit further, the commission adopted for recommendation an amended version of what was submitted to the Board of Alders. And during the meeting, there were some redundancies identified in the categorical exclusions. And then there was also some discussion about the use of the term hardship in the sections on hardship. And so in response to those discussions, we resolved the redundancies and we removed the language on hardship.
So essentially, if I were working in the Microsoft Word environment, and I accepted all these changes, it would produce this clean copy. That's correct. Okay, great. So what you're requesting is for this committee to recommend that this clean version be given a favorable recommendation to the full board.
That is correct.
Thank you. Okay. So, a couple things on the details. Duration is 12 months for repeal by the city, whichever happens first. And I presume, if the zoning is accomplished before 12 months is over, there could be some method of declaring that the the moratorium should no longer apply. How would that happen? What would be the legal mechanism for ending the moratorium earlier than the stated 12 months?
I regret that you're dating me tonight because Laura should be here. We did this, the last moratorium we did was for the solid waste and the junkyards. Where we put a moratorium in place for a period of time, and then we work with all the junkyards pretty much to clean up. Like if you go like Chase Waste today, it was just a disaster, but we got it all cleaned up. We work with them. We did the new ordinance. In the order, so the cover order, you know, with all the whereases, sales, it will say, we went through this process, adopted moratorium, here's the new thing. And it'll say, now therefore, moratorium over, now therefore, new regulations hereby adopted. So it'll go in tandem. And that could be any time before the 12 months. If we don't do this and you don't adopt anything, this automatically ends within 12 months of the effective date. And no further action is required. It just ends automatically, no further administrative actions at all.
Great. So just to restate what you said, basically, once the zoning text and map changes, whatever they are submitted to the board, in that package would be an effective clause in the resolution that says this moratorium will be over once those things are passed and go into effect.
That's correct.
Okay, great. So it's done by legislation. Okay, that's what I thought. Just want to make sure that there's not some random city staffer, because it won't happen, just on Facebook declaring it's over. That's actually not like a legal repeal. It would have to be repealed by legislation passed by the Board of Alders, or just come to an end at the end of the 12 months. Okay, good. This moratorium may not exceed 12 months unless approved by the Board of Alders by majority vote. So this body, according to this moratorium legislation, would have the ability to extend it. But it doesn't say by how much. So there's no particular guardrail. Like, what if the Board of Alders decided, well, let's extend it by 5 years? I don't think we would do that. But there's nothing that would stop us from doing that. At least not in the ordinance.
Correct, not in the ordinance language. We would certainly welcome a friendly amendment should you wish, no more than an additional 12 months or something like that. But there's significant case law, largely around affordable housing statutes, that communities get in a lot of trouble if these things go on. So.
Yeah. Yes, I do recall Attorney Williams mentioning that in the commission meeting. Okay. There's the categorical exemptions, and then there's the process for requesting an exception, which comes to this Board of Alders. Do I have that right? It's an exception, right?
It's an exemption.
Exemption. Let's skip the, because exception means something in zoning law, doesn't it? The categorical exclusion, and then a process for requesting an exemption. Okay, thank you. Now, the draft ordinance says that the Board of Alders shall consider the following criteria. What is that guidelines or those requirements? Could the Board of Alders consider additional criteria in considering whether or not to grant an exemption? That may be a question for you, Attorney Williams.
Yeah, I have that answer. This is, the way I read this is it's an exhaustive list and it shouldn't be added to it. It says including but not limited to, I think there's an indication, but I don't believe there's any indication or intent that there be additional things to consider, and that might give way to some arbitrary stuff anyway.
So the intention is for the Board of Alders in its decision making to be guided and to like limit its discretion to those factors which are related to the goals behind the eventual zoning changes, right? Correct. So it's important for Board of Alders members to know that it's not carte blanche to give an exemption to your own goals. I mean, nobody's going to do that either. That's a recusable thing. But okay. So you do intend for those criteria to be exhaustive, to be like what the board thinks about when you accept decision.
Yes.
Thank you. All right. Now, when I look at the categorical exemptions, exclusions. Let me get my X word correct here, EXC something. I had a couple questions. One was about matters exempt from review by the City Office of Building Inspection and Enforcement. Would that be like city-owned assets? So what work on that area would be exempt from, like, building department inspecting that? Maybe the rail yard, I guess, since it's federal.
Sure. So there are some exemptions related to federal and state activities. This was more of a catch-all for, like, maybe a carnival or a food truck or something that, we do licensing for, but it's not a building permit, if you will. So the categorical exclusions would be as earlier. So if someone wants to reuse the lower theater space or the new restaurant, the Greek Olive, the run of course of business, that requires a building permit. Then there's some stuff that just, we don't really catch it at all, and we don't want it to be tripped up either. We've got a lot of activities down at Longmore which don't require any specific building permit necessarily.
Thank you for that. That helps me understand it better. My last question for the moment, Madam Chair, thank you for your patience, is again on the categorical exclusions, 2.8 matters which involve implementation of existing approved general plans. Now, I know that that refers to a general plan associated with the PDD, but could that refer to any other kind of general plan? I guess I'm wondering if we should have the words planned development district in the language.
I think that's a wise suggestion, and I believe that it was intended to address.
So in other words, if some entity has gotten approval for a planned development district and the board has adopted it, and part of adoption of a planned development district is a general plan, and then there's a later process for a detailed plan. What you want is someone who has like an approved PDD with approved general plan, not to be stopped because they haven't gotten to the step of doing a specific detailed plan this year. And does that we actually have examples of that in the long one?
So the one you may hear from council tonight on this matter, the Maritime Center Fusco project would be a good example of that, where the board has approved the general plans, but the detailed plans have not yet come in. So that particular project meets the goals of the Longmore Responsible Growth Plan, and we felt it was appropriate for a categorical exclusion. Any new general plans, I would suggest to you that should be captured by the moratorium, just to make sure that that we're totally in line with the plan going forward. But the one that's a good example of where general plans were recently approved, detailed plans are forthcoming, and we want to make sure that that rolls on schedule.
Thank you. That's it for now, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Good evening again. Thank you for your presentation. You had mentioned that there will be community meetings. Should this be approved? What community and where? What community are you reaching out to for this?
I think we were, I saw that in the timeline, that we put in the timeline. I think we're talking community, this is to do, and I think we did ourselves, so Mike sort of picked it up at the end, which is, this is to do the new zoning. To do the new zoning, or to redo the zoning ordinance on Longmore, which we've been working on since last year, but we just haven't submitted. We haven't finalized and submitted it to the board. So that, I think that would be what we refer to as community meetings. We have done some community meetings. We obviously, we want to do community meetings for this kind of moratorium in advance of submission. So we did a business community meeting, specifically inviting, we have a pretty robust list of about 50 or 60 business contacts in the Longmore district alone. So we invited them to a meeting, say about 2 months ago when we were first submitting this. Oliver Rodriguez always attends these as well. From Ward 6, who represents the Longmore area. So we did that. We did a community meeting there. We shared both the PowerPoint and the ordinance with the business community there, and frankly got very little negative feedback, if any, and of course, and a lot of supportive feedback from folks like Fusco, who have up to 500 residential units plus a host of other commercial and public space approved, approved by PDD, and will be coming for the folks for the for site plan approval and that sort of thing in the next, in the next ensuing year, let's say. So yeah, so we've done a lot of that, the community work beforehand, and then certainly any sort of major zoning change that we would do would be, I think that's what we refer to when we talk about community, to be significant community outreach.
And I'm sure that you will do your due diligence to make sure that the alder representing that area will stay and be informed and involved in that process. And this is still also a little off topic, but it was mentioned, so I feel the right to say it. I can't imagine 5,000 people working there.
Mhm.
Who are the large employers there? Was that number 5,000?
You have 500 in South. You have probably what similar number of the terminal.
Maritime Center.
Then in the
The
Maritime
Maritime
Center,
Center.
and then you have one long.
Yes. Okay.
Huge clinical.
Maybe you have another 80 people, Jordans. And so I think it adds up.
Oh, the
more.
okay. Yeah. Okay. I got it now. Yeah, I was trying to locate these places. 5,000 people.
In the hotels. Yeah.
Wow.
And the team.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Thank you.
I believe it's time to ask the public comment.
Fantastic.
Thank you so much for your presentation. With the list, we'll actually give these folks a minute to get back to their seats, and then we'll open up for public comment. Okay, on my list, I'm Matt Hernandez. Back to you first. Please use the microphone and state your name and address for the record.
Good evening, Madam Chair and members. My name is Matt Bernelli. I'm at 265 Church Street. I'm with the law firm of Shipman and Goodwin, and here on behalf of Fusco Harbor Associates. Is this loud enough?
Great.
Before I get started, I'd like to compliment you on the prior piece of legislation, person first disability language. As a former longtime member of the Disability Committee and someone who works in other towns, I can tell you New Haven is often looked to as a model by a lot of our neighboring towns because of our the way the city has handled a lot of those issues. So it's great to see New Haven leading on that topic. But I'm here tonight to talk about the moratorium. On behalf of Fusco Harbor Associates, we support the moratorium. I do have one requested minor comment or amendment, but as you know, Fusco Harbor has proposed a residential and commercial development in their property on Long Wharf, and that was approved by the City Planning Commission and subsequently by the Board of Alders. That plan was modeled on the Long Wharf Responsible Growth Management Plan, and that plan was itself developed after years of stakeholder input, the work of Alder Rodriguez, and a lot of members of her districts and other districts that abut that area, as well as city staff. I will say that that plan, if you read it, paints with a very big brush. It's a rare opportunity, once in a generation, maybe 2 generations, to reshape the city's relationship to the waterfront. And we don't have a lot of waterfront that isn't used for industrial or other purposes that are generally uninvited. To paint with a big brush, you need to, have everybody moving in the same direction. Government plays such an important role in that because they can do things that the rest of the stakeholders can't, like large-scale planning. And so a moratorium is really a perfect tool to allow the zoning regulations to catch up with and reflect the plan the vision that's been developed for long. In the absence of a moratorium, the biggest threat to that vision is the piecemeal development under the existing regulations. So this is an opportunity to bring the vision to fruition and allow staff to work with stakeholders to do the hard work of converting what is a conceptual plan for Long Wharf into the detailed language of regulation. Obviously, Fusco is excited about that because they believe in the waterfront. They've been down there for a long time. And we believe that you're seeing sort of the proof of concept. Mr. Piscatelli mentioned the Hotel Marcel. You have the existing Maritime Center. You have the boathouse. As you start to get a critical density of attractions down there, people will continue to want to come to the Veterans Long Wharf Park and other amenities. And so, Fusco, has also seen that vision, and we brought in our application. I think residents of the city have spoken and said they want more access. So we think it's a great plan. We're supportive of it. The moratorium, I think, achieves the goal. Our one comment is that Alder Marchand, you picked up on it in 4B8, the categorical exclusion for matters which involve implementation of existing approved general plans. That, as you heard, is really intended to exclude plans like the Fusco plan that have received general plan approval under the PDD section of the regulations. And we think it does it, but it probably could be a little clearer if the language were just amended to say matters which involve implementation of existing general plans approved pursuant to section 65 of the zoning regulations. Just because general plans isn't a defined term, and that's tethers it to the statute, to the regulations. But without that, it's a fine moratorium, and we would speak in support of it. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Any questions?
I do, Madam Chair, and thank you so much for coming and speaking with us this evening. My question will be, would you repeat that line? The amendment.
Sure, actually, I wrote it out.
Oh, wonderful. So through you, Madam Chair, if we can receive a copy of that, that would be helpful. That's all I have, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
I will ask if there are any members of the public wishing to testify in this item. Second time, if there are any members of the public wishing to testify in this item. Third time for the measure. Is there anyone from the public wishing to testify in this item?
Madam Vice Chair, before we before you consider a motion to close the public hearing, I would like to get city staff, or at least our corporation councils, weigh in on the amendment, of the suggested amendment, if possible. Prudent.
I didn't hear you.
To repeat for staff, I would like to have Corporation Counsel weigh in on the amendment that was presented to us by the attorney for Fusco.
Hi, thank you for the opportunity. I agree. I think that's a good clarification of the intent of that particular section. So I would agree with it.
Name and address for the record.
Thank you. I'm sorry, Robert Williams, 20 West Drive, now Corporation Counsel.
I have no further questions, Madam Vice Chair. Thank you.
Madam Chair,
Yes, over my shop.
I move that we close the public portion of this meeting.
Second.
so that was moved in second discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
The public portion is closed.
We will public portion. Alderman Shaw.
I move item 1.
Second.
That was moved in second discussion. Alderman Shaw.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to thank the city staff, particularly the Director of the Office for Services for People with Disabilities, for her hard work on the important task. It's more than symbolic. It's actually a substantive change to the ordinance to update that language. And I really appreciate this document that she provided in our packets to help me understand better that we should speak about people with disabilities, we should speak about them as people who have a disability, but not they are disabled people. But there's a way to acknowledge their personhood, and that the disability is just a particular attribute that may or may not define them. It's up to them and their circumstance. And so I think that is a really good way to reframe that. And I feel enlightened in a way that I wasn't before I read this packet. And I think updating the ordinance so that the terminology is contemporary and sensitive, and affirming and acknowledging the full personhood of people with disabilities is a commendable thing to do. And I recommend we vote to give a favorable recommendation to the full board. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Any further discussion? Agreed. Assignment of a motion.
You've made a motion, we've discussed it. Now you call for the vote.
I don't know. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, it passes, please.
It does vote.
It does vote. Alderman Shaw.
Madam Chair, I move item 2.
Second.
The item is moved in second discussion. Order 25.
Madam Chair, I move to amend the item by substitution. Second.
All right, and this is moved in second discussion on the motion to amend. The amendment. Alderman Shaw.
Just waiting for you to call me, Madam Chair. My mother raised me correctly. Thank you very much. So the staff explained that the item that was submitted to the Board of Alders came in a particular format, but it was changed. And what we have here as the green tab clean version is different than what was submitted to the originally to the Board of Alders. So in order for this committee to deliberate on the updated version, we need to substitute the original submitted version with this clean version, which is what the staff are intending for us to discuss and vote on. So that's what my amendment does, is it substitutes the original version with what the staff have presented here this evening. And I recommend my colleagues support the motion to amend by substitution.
Any further discussion? So let's vote. All those in favor of the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
So now we are back to the item as amended. Any discussion on the item as amended? Alderman Shaw.
Madam Chair, I move to make a further amendment. Second.
Item is moved in second. Discussion. Alderman Shaw.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am going to, this motion to amend is simply to implement the additional language recommended by Counsel for the Fiscal Corporation. It's section 8 in reference, and the wording is matters which involving implementation of existing general plans approved pursuant to section 65 of the zoning regulations. That would be the amendment. It just tweaks that one sentence and replaces it with that. That's, I think it's prudent because, you know, the word general plan in life can mean a variety of things, but in the zoning ordinance, it means a particular thing. And in order to make sure that if you're being exact, it's good to quote chapter and verse as it were. Thank you, Madam. I recommend colleagues support this motion to amend. Thank you.
Okay. All those in favor of the items amended?
The further amendment.
For
Aye.
any opposed? Carried. And we are now back to the item as amended in the amendment. Alderman Shaw.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to speak in favor of giving this amended ordinance amendment. I think we should give it a favorable recommendation to the full board. A lot of work went into making that Long Wharf responsible growth plan. It involved a lot of people. I know that our colleague from Ward 6 and her predecessor were both very involved in that. And so all that's happening here is that the city is saying, we're going to put a hold on any new applications with certain exclusions or possible exemptions. We're going to put a hold on those until we can get the regulations. The kind of detail of the zoning code itself for those districts, for those zoning districts, to be in line with the vision. Because just because you make a vision doesn't mean you've enacted regulation. And it's similar. But this happens a fair amount where we create a neighborhood plan, build a downtown, Mill River, even the comprehensive plan. It's a vision document that has a lot of information, but it's not like defined detailed regulations themselves. And so let's give ourselves the time to write those regulations and make sure that they fall in line with the overall vision. And let's just remind ourselves that the group that will have the final say over those final regulations is the Board of Aldermen, right? So the one thing I would just say to the staff is that it's an ambitious time frame. A year may sound like a very long time, but in matters of zoning, it can go by very quickly. When you consider that there's all sorts of meetings that happen before the item is even finished and submitted, and then once it's submitted, it goes to city plan, and then to a hearing here before this committee, possibly a joint committee, and then first and second reading. So I'm glad to hear that the city staff say that they're already well into it, because that makes me more confident that the 12-month time frame is feasible. But it's going to have to move with a lot of deliberate intent in order for it to hit that time frame. But I think it's an appropriate use of our authority to declare this moratorium, and I encourage colleagues to vote in favor of the item. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Alderman.
Thank you. And so I am in favor of this. Initially, I wasn't, it's not my board, but I wasn't, because so often the city says that they're going to do stuff, and they forever been talking about Longwood. I was one of those 5,000 people that went down at Longwood, and it still looks the same. Well, not totally the same, but I like the fact that this moratorium is only for a year, and that it will expire unless you guys come back to talk to us and really give us some detailed explanation of why additional time is needed, if that happens. And so I think that it is important to, give the city time to be able to really outline specifically what's going on, because we do want people to come into New Haven. We do want people to experience New Haven, and not just, one part of it. We want them to be able to come to Long Wharf and be at the pier and all those things. And so I think that this is a right step. It's a good step in the right direction. I'm happy that the alder of the area is also in support of this, and so that says that they're gonna have to take care of business. And so I'm in support of this, and so I hope the rest of our colleagues will also be in support. So thank you.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. I'm also in support of this piece of legislation. This is a prime piece of real estate, and it makes sense to get it right. We are building quickly throughout the city. Buildings are going up, apartments are going up. Some of them may be good. In 10 years, we'll find out whether or not some of these buildings are actually what we wanted to have. And so I appreciate city plan, economic development there. Foresight and saying, let's pump the brakes on this. Let's get this done right. I'm in agreement with my colleague from the 22nd Ward. But they have 12 months. And so let's hear back from them and let's see what they have. And the good thing about it is that in 12 months, we'll still be here. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, colleagues. So no further discussion, let's vote. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes. Alderman Shaw.
I move we adjourn, Madam Chair.
Second.
The items moved in second discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you all to my colleagues, for your patience with me this evening. Thank you all for being here.
Good job.
Good job.
Thank you.
That's right.
What was the second amendment?
Here, that's for you.
That's going where?
I'll show you where.
I'm assuming the one that Carlos gave you is the